4 major conclusions after 38 years of study and investigation.
The first one, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. Some so-called unidentified flying objects are alien spacecraft. Most are not. I don't care about those. 2, there is no doubt that a small number of people within governments, both in the United States and overseas, have been actively covering up the truth about these visits. There really is a cosmic Watergate.
3rd, none of the arguments made against conclusions 1 and 2 by the debunkers of the world, including my University of Chicago classmate Carl Sagan, stand up under careful scrutiny. Their arguments sound very good until you check them against the evidence, and then they collapse. And finally, 4th, this is the biggest story of the millennium. Visits to planet Earth by alien spacecraft, successful cover-up of the best data, the bodies and the wreckage, for almost 49 years.
Mr. Friedman, there are books, there are magazine articles, there are television interview programs which have very little time, such as this one. Give it your best shot. If you are seeking to convince the skeptical, what do you point to?
I'm seeking to convince the healthy agnostics. The skeptics don't want to listen to the data and my findings. I point to the 2,400 plus landing trenches in the environment collected from 65. The 3,200 cases in Project Blue Book Special Report 14, 20% of which couldn't be explained, and all the characteristics we attribute to flying saucers. I point to the 3,500 pilot sightings collected by a NASA scientist on the West Coast. I point to Bud Hopkins' 140 abductees with a waiting list of 200, and an enormous amount of data in the form of documents, some of them obtained from the government directly, some not so directly, clearly indicating that our planet is being visited, that some UFOs are alien spacecraft, and that we are indeed dealing with a cosmic Watergate. For example, I also point to the 92 different witnesses that William Moore and I have talked to about the Roswell incident that was described briefly in the early piece on the program.
I'll tell you what, let me make it a little tougher for you. Instead of all these pieces of evidence to which you're referring, refer to one concrete, substantive, visible piece of evidence that exists somewhere, something that we can look at, touch, feel.
I think you've asked the wrong question. By the nature of the beast, the pieces that were picked up at Roswell, for example, which are described in the document that was alluded to earlier, are not available for your viewing or my viewing. They clearly are top secret, eyes only, something above that.
Understand, but for example, the abductees, and you say there are how many of them now? 100 and...
There are over 120 of those.
Now, none of them has come back with anything except memories.
That seems to be the case. They also come back with descriptions of writing. 5 of those looked at independently. None of those had any way of knowing what the other people had drawn from what they claimed to have seen. So we have duplication that seems to pass any notion of randomness that would be attributable to phony stories, if you will.
Veteran UFO researcher Stanton Friedman believes that MJ-12 would have been motivated to keep quiet about advanced alien technology in order to protect national security in the tense Cold War standoff following World War II.
There was a real belief in Washington that when Stalin got ready, he would attack. That was a general consensus that we were going to be in a battle to the end with the Soviet Union. And therefore, any kind of technological advantage we could get would be well worth having, and you couldn't possibly release that information to anybody.
In researching his book on the Majestic 12 documents, Friedman meticulously verified every detail within the Eisenhower document. He investigated each supposed member of the group and found that they were the best and brightest military minds of the day, including Secretary of Defense James Forrestal, high-ranking Army, Navy, and Air Force officers, and the first 4 directors of Central Intelligence. Only one name on the list didn't seem to fit. Publicly, MJ-12 member Dr. Donald Menzel was an astronomer at Harvard and a rabid UFO debunker.
Menzel, in his position at Harvard, was in a perfect position to act as the astronomer telling the world this is all nonsense. Nothing to do with anything. This isn't real. We've got explanations for everything, which is what he did say.
And I have found that his explanations are just plain wrong when you analyze them carefully. As a matter of fact, you get the impression that here was a top-notch scientist treating this subject totally unscientifically, trying to think up anything that he could do to snow the public, as it were, with an explanation, even if it made no sense.
You know, it might seem, well, why would he be lying? Why would he do this? And others would defend him and say, oh, he wouldn't do this and he wouldn't do that. Well, of course he would. He absolutely would, as would every single one of those individuals, and they wouldn't tell their wives or anything else. Because that was what was important for their country.
Along with the Eisenhower briefing document, both Chandray and Friedman have found cryptic references to MJ-12 in declassified government documents, but nothing has bolstered the authenticity of MJ-12 more than this. More anonymous films sent to ufologist Don Berliner in 1994. On it, a supposed military field manual dated 1954.
This was a set of instructions, really, to retrieval teams who would be at the scene soon after an event took place in which a saucer had crashed and in which there were bodies and wreckage. How to wrap them, what kind of boxes to use, where to send the pieces, what the cover stories were. And one of the things that comes through loud and clear is they wouldn't have put such a manual together unless this had happened more than once. Which makes you wonder, so how many of the crashes were there? How many bodies were retrieved?
For verification of the new manual, Friedman turned to a former colleague, retired McDonnell Douglas scientist Dr. Robert Wood. If Wood, an expert in the detection of forged documents, could authenticate the manual, Friedman felt he would have proof of a government alien conspiracy.
My initial reaction when I first saw them was, if this is genuine, why, it's dynamite, like the smoking gun.
Dr. Wood was painstaking in his examination of the document pages, comparing it to an authentic Army field manual from the same period. The size of both manuals was identical, conforming to the standard 6:9 ratio for government field manuals of the era. And Dr. Wood examined this seal, which other experts insist is proof that this manual is a fake.
If you look at the front of this document, at the bottom, there's a logo that says War Department. And the War Department was actually eliminated at the end of World War II. So you'd expect they would have stopped using the logo. But in fact, the Army, in its field manuals, continued to use the War Department logo up until as late as 1960. And we have exact copies of such manuals.
If these documents are genuine, they prove the case. You don't need anything more.
And, Friedman says, we are not the only ones who will suffer from continued secrecy.
I think one of the reasons they're coming here is to make sure we don't go out, to take our brand of friendship, namely hostility, other places. This is truly a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare. So I don't think we can expect aliens to deal with us as equals. We're not. We haven't earned our place at the Galactic Federation Round Table. I'm not trying to reach the extremists, the people at both ends of the opinion spectrum. I'm trying to reach the healthy agnostic, the guy who says, I don't know. Tell me why you think they're real. That's what I'll do tonight. I'll review 5 large-scale scientific studies that most people have never heard about.
Who financed those studies?
The government. That's the interesting thing. The biggest study ever done was financed by the United States Air Force. It was done by a research institute. They covered 3,200 sightings. 20% couldn't be explained, completely separate from the ones for which there wasn't enough information. They did a quality evaluation. The better the quality, the more likely to be an unknown. And they put out a totally misleading press release. And it was looking at that data, 250 charts, tables, and graphs, and that's what physicists are all about, is looking at data, and looking at the press release and saying, hey, wait a minute, these don't compute. So I've spent a great deal of time in the last 10 years anyway, going to places like the National Archives, Library of Congress, the Truman Library, the Eisenhower Library.
Has the Freedom of Information Act helped you in your quest?
Yes, it's helped. Sometimes it's rather frustrating. I mean, we've gotten over 5,000 pages of stuff from a whole slew of agencies, the FBI, the CIA, and so forth, that they had said they had nothing, and then, oh, look what we found.
All right, well, I'm sitting here, and this is what I find myself wondering. Why? Why
the cover-up?
Why you call it a cosmic Watergate? Do you think that, like, if all of a sudden President Reagan came on television and said, we have some information that, in fact, all these years, yes, these unidentified flying objects may be visiting us from some celestial, but you think people are going to run underground?
Well, wait,
would you be afraid? No.
You're talking 1987. Let's go back to 1947 when all the noise began. Before we'd put up a satellite, before there was man in space. The government's primary concerns, according to the documents we've gotten, and I'll show a couple of these in just a second, were how do the darn things work? Imagine if you could duplicate the technology.
Sure.
They knew right off in 1947, a crash occurred outside Roswell, New Mexico, within 2 weeks of the big noise beginning about flying saucers. And a colleague and I have talked to 92 people in conjunction with that one event.
Okay.
We found Air Force generals, FBI agents, the pieces were found, bodies were found. An announcement was made that they had a crash saucer. Within 24 hours, they put in the fix to cover it up.
That's the famous thing. So what your contention is that ever since then there's been this long web of cover-up about that thing?
Now, you cover up not by telling everybody everything. The important thing, and this is where my background in classified work comes in, is compartmentalization, need to know. Just because you have a clearance doesn't mean you get access to the data. And they put special caveats, they're called top secret ultra, top secret umbra, top secret magic for UFO stuff. And to illustrate the problem, some people think that the Freedom of Information Act is a magic key that unlocks all the door. Let me give you an example. We went after the CIA, everybody's favorite target, of course. They released 900 pages of stuff with internal references indicating there were hundreds more documents that they hadn't released. They put out a list of 57 documents originating with other agencies, 18 from the super secret National Security Agency. Naturally, we went after those. They turned us down flat. We appealed. We go to court. They did a search. They find 160 documents. We want them. You can't have them. We asked that the judge be allowed, federal court judge, be allowed to see the documents to decide whether they were hiding behind national security improperly. They refused to give them to the judge. They provide him with a 21-page top secret affidavit for him to see in chambers. Our lawyer doesn't get to see it. He looks at that and he decides in their favor. We go after the 21-pager. We're unsuccessful at the Federal Court of Appeals. Meanwhile,
what do you think's on these 21
Well,
pages?
we got it. Here it is. And the only trouble is, and this illustrates the problem, as you start going through it.
We have some of this to show. All right, yeah, go ahead.
As you start going through it, you pretty soon find.
This is looks like my autobiography here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is ridiculous. 80% of this document that we got under Freedom of Information is expurgated. So anybody who says there isn't a cover-up.
What do you think's in there? What's crossed out?
Their justification, all their information about sources and methods and details of sightings at the NSA, which listens in on conversations everywhere.
I still don't understand.
Okay, first you want to figure out how they work. You can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. You set up a secret project to figure out how they work, especially when you got a crash saucer. According to this recently released, leaked to us roll of film, here are prints made from the film, Xerox copies of that. This is 1952, a briefing for General Eisenhower. You notice it says top secret magic, eyes only. High-class stuff. Everything we found indicates this is legitimate. They were concerned with panic in 52. They were concerned with technology as well. And they didn't know the motivation of the aliens. What do you tell the public? There are these guys coming here. They got technology we don't have. And we can't do anything about it. But we thought you might want to know so you can go panic off in the streets.
Well, everyone always says, you know, I want to see some proof. I want to see some proof. It's easy to doctor a photograph. We have a videotape here of...
Yes, there's some visuals. I made a movie, or was heavily involved in a movie. UFOs are real. This is an excerpt from the movie.
Did you work with Steven Spielberg on this?
No, unfortunately.
Right, what do we have here?
This was Hollywood. This is taken over Catalina Island, and it's taken by an official Navy photographer sitting with a $20,000 piece of gear in a helicopter going to film something else. He sees this object in the sky and realizes it's standing still, and then it starts moving. And so we've slowed it down here. It does go in front of the mountain on the left. That gives us a handle on the size of the object because we know the distance to the mountain.
I want to see it go through the mountain, come out the other side.
Now that would be a
I'll
neat
know.
trick.
Yeah.
That would be a neat trick. Anyway, this has been, you can't see any wings, you can't see any tail.
What kind of, if any, I mean, that, you know, you haven't convinced me. Although
my lecture's an hour and a half tonight.
No,
Come on out.
No, althougugh I basically believe that there is life.
Most people believe that flying saucers are real, not only that there's life
I basically do. I mean, but that tape didn't convince me. How just because it could be retouched, what evidence do we have, or what kind of compilations do we have from people who have actually claimed to have been abducted?
The abduction phenomenon is getting a lot of attention. There's an expert here in town, Dr. David Jacobs at Temple University, did his PhD thesis, one of 6 that have been done, on UFOs. He's working with about a dozen abductees. Bud Hopkins in New York, working with a team of psychiatrists and psychologists, has worked with 140 abductees, did an interesting thing, had 9 of them tested by a psychologist who didn't know that they had this factor in common, this peculiar experience, who said these are not crazy people. They all give some signs of having been exposed to trauma, which is an interesting thing. And the abduction phenomena is very important because it gives us a little insight as to what these aliens are doing here. And because it's important to the people who are involved. It's not a friendly experience, so to speak.
Do you think these aliens ever, like, want to go to Disney World or anything? I mean, No, I mean, they're here.
Look, all
you
they
think
do,
what do
they
want to
listen
do?
to television. They get enough humor to last them a
They're
lifetime.
watching now, probably. What is this Betty Hill alien?
Yeah, we
visual?
have a picture, and I don't know whether, there it is. This is the bust done from drawings done by an artist sitting next to Barney Hill. Is Barney, under hypnosis, describes the aliens that took him and his wife, Betty, on board a UFO in New Hampshire in 1961. This was used as a model for the masks for the actors who played the aliens in the television movie, The UFO Incident. James Earl Jones played the part of Barney. I was a technical advisor on the film. And this is the earliest case to give us any real insight as to what was happening with abduction cases.
What do the people who are abducted say?
They
say that they've gone
generally
away
what's happened.
Obviously, they come back.
Typically, they're taken on board against their will, out in the boonies, nobody around to interrupt the procedure. They are powerless, which bothers them. You don't like being under somebody else's control. Typically, they're put on what I could only refer to as an examination table, examined, specimens taken of skin, hair, etc. In the ones that Bud has been looking at, he has found a number of people who apparently, women who have had ova extracted and reimplanted, men who've had sperm samples taken. Breeding experiments is all you can say. And they're sort of kind to dumb animals. They're not out to hurt. They're calming people down. You know, it'll be over in a little bit kind of thing.
It's very easy to be calmed down when you're in a spacecraft and these weird people are looking at you taking samples from your skin. Oh, I'll stay very calm in that situation.
They seem to have them under control. What I'm saying is that there's a commonality of description here, and often people don't remember much of the experience other than a missing time experience.
Why are you interested? And who are you to know so many things about that and to look like as if you believe all this story? Means you believe it.
Well, okay. I spent 14 years in industry working on canceled government-sponsored research and development programs, nuclear airplanes, fission rockets, fusion nuclear rockets, nuclear power plants for space. I worked for major corporations, General Electric, Westinghouse, General Motors, TRW, Aerojet General. I have been, right from the start, interested in far-out technology, advanced technology, space travel, things like that. And I've worked on programs that, we operated nuclear rockets this big at a power level of 4,000 megawatts. We operated aircraft engines on nuclear power. And about 1961, at the University of California Library in Berkeley, huge library, I ran across a privately published version of Project Blue Book's Special Report number 14, the largest official scientific study ever done for the United States Air Force, Project Blue Book. They had data on 3,200 sightings investigated by professional people spending full time, categorizations, quality evaluations, charts, tables, graphs, maps, 240 of them. I was in data heaven because data's my ballgame. I like taking lots of information, making sense out of it. These are two released CIA UFO documents. You can read 8 words there, 9 words here. Totally useless words, info, location, date, things like that. Now, there are 2 further points. Anybody who says that agencies of the United States government are not withholding information about flying saucers are either lying or ignorant or both. I have been challenging some of the debunkers to get any of the NSA documents, 156, they say so. And it's been 10 years. Not one so far. Or the CIA documents, the rest of them. Now, some people say, look, 14 documents over a lot of years, obviously it wasn't very important. That's not true. I talked to the man who forced the CIA to release its information about mind control experiments. Illegal use of drugs like LSD and not telling the people and not with permission, nasty stuff. His first release from the government was 400 pages. He was a lawyer in Washington, so he could go back to court easily. He threatened them. I'm going to go back to court. I know there must be more. There's internal. We'll look again. They found another 400 pages. And he made more noise. They found another box and another box and another box. To make a long story short, he wound up getting 40,000 pages. The first release was 1% of what he eventually got, and I have it on good authority. He still didn't get it all. So what we're dealing with here is a clear situation where agencies of the United States government are absolutely withholding information. And as a matter of fact, an agency of the United States Air Force, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, wrote a memo about me saying we have reason to believe that all of our units, some or all of our units, and there are over 120 units of the OSI, would be receiving a Freedom of Information Act request from Stanton Friedman, they gave my address, concerning UFOs. If such a request is received, do not, repeat, do not respond as required by Air Force Regulation 12-30. Instead, respond as follows. All such requests must be submitted to the main office of the OSI. Now, if you get the regulation, what they're supposed to do when they get a request is find the information, send it to headquarters for review, and notify the requestor that they have found the information, thus revealing the existence of the information. What they were telling their units to do is don't tell them anything other than to talk to us, and we can tell them anything we want. Now, if there is nothing to cover up, why do you tell your people to violate their own regulations? I worked on classified programs for 14 years. I will absolutely guarantee you that secrets can be kept. I helped keep some. Furthermore, I've been to 15 archives, all kinds, in the United States and one in Canada. I have never yet seen special compartmented information. That's this extra word after the top secret, ultra, umbra, magic, whatever. Does that mean there isn't any such material? No, I asked at the Eisenhower Library, do you have any special compartmented information? Yes. This is in person, so we couldn't lie very easily. How much do you have? About a drawer full, file drawer full. Can you search it for certain terms, magic, MJ12, things like that? No, it would violate security. So unless one has access to the special compartmented information, one will not get to the secrets. And despite all my looking, I have never seen any such material except that affidavit, and we don't even know what the word is after. So are secrets being kept? Absolutely.